Well, hi everybody out there in LGBTQ land. I'm Roger Fraser, and to my left here is Andy Thayer of the Gay Liberation Network, and we're on CAN TV here at 6:30. And as you can see, our title today is Dismal Decisions, or Dismal Decision. It's about the electoral charade or barn dance or horse race, whatever you'd like to call it. You probably know us well enough to know that we're not in any way endorsing any candidates, supporting any particular party tonight. Andy, I know you've got some things to say. I know we want to mention about the slut walk coming up, but also that you have some photos because our dear friend Andy unfortunately had the misfortune of having to go to Cleveland and also to Philadelphia to cover these conventions. So we have some pictures to show you about that, and we'll make comments about it throughout. Andy?
Well, first, I think we'd like to show people that, wrong one there, sorry. Slut Walk 2016 is coming up. And Slut Walk is a march against rape culture, organized by women who are, and some men, angry about how casually accepted rape and sexual harassment are in the United States and, frankly, around the world. And we encourage people to join this. Part of being a feminist, part of being for LGBTQ liberation is standing up for the rights against sexual harassment. This particular march is going to be happening Saturday, August 20th, 12 noon, starting at the Bean at Millennium Park, which is basically Monroe and Michigan Avenue. We'll have this announcement up again just before the close of the show, but we encourage everyone who's concerned with LGBTQ liberation and women's liberation in general to participate in this Saturday, August 20th event. So please check that out.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I'd like to get right to these photos that you took at both conventions, and then we'll start with the Republican convention.
Mm-hmm. Well, Cleveland's a very nice city, as is Philadelphia, but it certainly wasn't on the days that I visited there. This was the kind of greeting that ordinary members of the public had. Miles, literally miles of so-called security fencing bracketing off the downtown, tons and tons of cops of all sorts. There's the Westin. How would you like to go into that hotel with the barricades in front of it here? Secret Service, every conceivable police force you can imagine in the streets, basically intimidating people from exercising their First Amendment rights. And for those of you who were around in Chicago in 2012, you remember that much the same script was run during the NATO events, where they tried to scare people away from exercising their First Amendment rights. Yeah. And that was certainly on full force in both cities. This sign, I think, is in particular interesting, that the United Way, which is a charitable organization, is putting up these very expensive banners all over the downtown. So when people give to the United Way, you think you're giving to help kids, you're helping after school programs or the elderly or whatever. No, you're giving, at least in this case, to erect expensive banners welcoming the predominantly wealthy people to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. This was one of the larger marches here. This was on the Monday of the convention here. People marching against the war right near the Republican National Convention. It should be said that the size of the demonstrations was not very large in Cleveland. Fortunately, fears about there being violence from some of the more unhinged Trump supporters versus, say, immigrant rights marchers did not happen, but there were people carrying huge weapons and so forth, civilians, because it's an open carry state, big guns to intimidate people, but there weren't even many of those in evidence, fortunately. This was obviously one of the things motivating many people, the epidemic of police violence that black people and Latinos particularly face. This here is a Tom Morello concert that was probably the biggest event of the thing. And it was a combination concert and a political rally with a wide variety of speakers. And then I think this, who would Jesus torture? And you think of the way that Jesus, the historical figure at least, ended his days on earth, how he might feel about torture. I thought that was pretty poignant. So
yes. Okay. Well, that's Republican convention. And do you have any? I believe you have even more pictures of the Democratic convention, right, Andy? So
yeah.
Why don't we check those out too?
Well, and the protests of the Democratic convention were much larger. This was one of the big ones here. You can see people marching from the city hall in the background towards the site of the Democratic National Convention in the southern end of Philly. A long march, and lots of people did it. The first day of the convention, there was a great and quite lively immigrant rights march. For as bad as Donald Trump has been about racist remarks against Mexicans and closing the borders against Muslims and other really reactionary nonsense, it should be remembered, and certainly immigrant rights marchers were remembering this, that President Obama has deported more people than any other president in U.S. history, more than any other. So, who needs a Trump when you've got the current policies paving the way for someone like Trump? And that wasn't lost on many of these marchers here. A moratorium on deportations. Again, stop the Obama administration deportations, the soon-to-be Hillary administration deportations as well, that are probably coming down the pike when she probably wins. Very interesting here. I got a chance to talk to these two young gentlemen, Soy Queer Latina or Latino, and they gave a very, very insightful commentary. You can find it on the GLN Facebook page, a short little film I took with them, speaking about why they participated. There's the Mexican flag, albeit with the rainbow on either side rather than the red. This cute kid here, I couldn't resist here. Stop deportations. It's that young man there may be born here and hence a citizen, and who knows if there's any number of families who lose their parents. Their parents, breaking up families. This is something that people have been talking about. Again, the huge so-called security fences. This one leading down to the Democratic National Convention. I couldn't resist the oligarchy response team. It's good to have some first responders in response to so many of the conventioneers.
Very creative.
And this woman here, I think that referencing some of the stuff that the DNC did to put their finger on the scales to tilt the elections towards the primaries, should say, towards Clinton.
Sure.
And this person here, I think he had a very apt, apt,
right?
Yeah.
I see it. Piss and poison. Sure.
Yeah. And you look at Hillary, who's supported every single war.
Yeah, let's remember this one here. This is
supported every single war during her political career. Not a single one she saw any problem with. In fact, she's promoted a number of them quite heavily.
Yes.
And this gentleman here, as well as a couple of slides after this, these were people who were protesting against the Clintons' role versus Haiti. A lot of people in the United States don't know this, but certainly Haitian emigres here and people in Haiti do that. All sorts of aid dollars were promised to Haiti after their horrendous earthquake, and virtually none of it reached the people who needed it. And the Clinton Foundation was all wrapped up in that. That's not the sort of thing that you'll hear from either the Democrats or the Republicans, because this actually hurts regular folks.
Well, but I feel your pain.
Yeah.
I feel your pain.
Yeah, we remember that from the 90s, don't we? Yeah, so this one here is a Black Lives Matter protest. And I think the sentiment on this protest was very interesting because it's got to be remembered that most of these big city mayors who are responsible for disciplining the police officers who beat up and kill people, they're Democratic mayors, including, of course, here in Chicago. Chicago's not unique in this. Most of these cities, whether you're talking Baltimore or Philly or what have you, they're almost all run by Democratic mayors. And so this was not lost on the organizers of this march here, as you see from these banners here. Hillary, delete yourself, talking about some of the nasty things that First Lady Hillary Clinton said against black youth in her past. These are some of the names, of course, of the many, many, many people that have been killed by the police, and people remembering them.
Yes.
And so there we go. So I think it was a series of very dynamic marches. A lot of people were ticked off. This isn't just a bunch of Bernie people. It was a mixture of Bernie people and people that were there for their issues who didn't have any faith in either party, reforming the Democrats or anything like that. It's a huge mixture of political ideas, especially at the Democratic convention.
I find that very interesting that that the demonstrations that were actually more robust at the Democratic convention than they were at the Republican convention. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I think that people saw the Democratic convention as more of an opening for people to say break with the Democrats, that the Republican Party has dwindled down into, frankly, a bigots club, and very hostile. They don't give the lip service to supporting people. Now, I don't think personally that the Democrats support people either.
Right.
And I think one of the most important things, there's a very good article, a Black Agenda report that just came out this morning that talks about how Hillary has succeeded in gathering all the worst oligarchs, the worst one percenters around her. You're talking about military generals. You're talking about people like John Negroponte, who ran the Contra War, has come out with a full-throated endorsement of Hillary. Yeah. Really, some of the worst war criminals, banksters. Right. Have lined up. They decided that Trump is too irresponsible to run the empire.
They're waiting for Kissinger, Henry Kissinger, to join the this arch war criminal.
They already got Madeleine Albright. They're reaching out to Colin Powell. I just read an article that the Clinton camp is looking for. You've got George Soros. You've got people like former Mayor Bloomberg, who I believe is the sixth most wealthy. So it really is a rogues gallery, and they're going to run. They're going to be the influencers on a Clinton administration, not the 99%.
Even Meg Whitman, who's the current CEO of Hewlett Packard and was a GOP candidate, a real backward candidate supporting the ending of legal marriage in California, has joined the pack of now supporting Hillary Clinton. I mean, she's got, as you say, a great group of billionaires lining up behind her, making donations and expecting something in return. These donations are not made just simply without expectations for payback. Now we have a caller, and why don't we take this call?
Yeah. If we still have them.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Speak up a little bit, sir. It's hard to hear you.
But the thing is, I never knew you guys were political. And I'm saying that because all of a sudden, you show pictures of the Republicans, and they were expecting a lot of trouble. That's why all the fences were up. But then you show a nice, joyous a parade and stuff in the Democrats. I don't care what you guys are, but the thing is, be truthful. Just say that you're on the Democratic side. And let me give you an example. You talk about police violence. How about all the policemen that were shot to death? I never hear you say anything about it. All you talk about is the Black Lives Matter, which have said they wanted dead cops, and when do they want them? They want them now. And yet, you talk so nicely about them. Start talking, if you guys are, I'm not going to doubt, because I really don't know, but please, start talking about the police in a nice way, instead of just about they're a bunch of, violent guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you for your comments, sir. Frankly, our position is that a pox on both their houses.
In terms of the parties.
Both parties, in fact, are not going to address the problems of the American people. And I'm talking about not just minorities, but just your average working people, yourself included, black or white, gay or straight out there. That the problems of people, their pocketbooks, the issues that they have, the racism, isn't going to be addressed by either candidate or more importantly, either party. And that's the point that we're trying to make here. But then, of course, it's not enough to just make this point. It's not enough to just say, Andy, I know, let's not put any confidence in the electoral system. There has to be something else, and I think this is the point you may be driving at, sir. There got to be something else that we can say that will, in some way, what do we put in its place? If it's not enough to just vote every 4 years or every 2 years, what then is the way forward for the American people, for all of us, to make the kind of gains that all of us want to make and find thwarted by this process?
Well, and I'd have to take issue with what the caller was saying, frankly. If I heard it, the audio was not very good. I don't know, was the phone line or what have you, but I gathered that you were taking us to task for talking about police officers who shoot people, particularly black people. And frankly, as people who are charged with upholding the law, who over and over get away with the worst kind of breaking of it. And we see that, of course, by the politicians themselves as well, in terms of the laws that they break, both leading parties. But police officers are charged with upholding the law. And so when they shoot someone, when they shoot a 12-year-old Tamir Rice in Cleveland and get away with it, when we see over and over in our own city any number of predominantly black victims of police violence, and we have to say, yeah, there's something wrong here. And yes, there is other kinds of violence. And yes, police officers do from time to time get shot, but not at anywhere near the same rate as any number of other occupations. Actually, police officers is not one of the most dangerous occupations out. There's plenty of other much more dangerous occupations, and yet they have been shielded from being taken to task for the repeated murders, and I mean that, murders of black people in this country. So we've covered that issue any number of times. Tonight we're talking about the parties and their conventions. One of the big issues that I'd like to bring up is these whole free trade agreements, because certainly Donald Trump has tried to make a lot of populist hay, saying that he's against quote-unquote free trade and NAFTA and so forth. And of course, Hillary's done the same thing. And why this is not just an academic question is not just because we've dealt with the effects of NAFTA, both here and in places like Mexico, which has been devastating to Mexico, but we've got two very important so-called free trade agreements up right in the docket right now. We're talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and a lesser-known one dealing with Europe, which is known as the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Both of these are up, and both of them are not about free trade. They're about creating trade blocks to get in a lot of smaller countries with the United States. With the TPP, it's basically U.S. and allies versus China, carving the world into trade blocks, freezing China out, and the latter, the one with Europe, is about freezing Russia out. Now, I personally don't have any truck with the human rights violations in either Russia or China. I've demonstrated in Moscow a couple of times about Putin's anti-gay policies. But you have to say that this is a move towards ginning up world conflict, and we've seen in history that economic conflicts can boil over into war. And so we've got Hillary Clinton pretending she's against these agreements. And that's worthy of a whole show there, but
of course it is, and you know, as NAFTA, we saw jobs being, you know, good paying living wage jobs disappearing. We'll see the same thing at TPP. I have no faith that Hillary Clinton is sincere in her sudden opposition to this, and one of the worst aspects of this for other people, other countries, is that it provides the protocols provide for corporations being able to sue governments that are trying to enforce labor and health and environmental laws that affect the profits of these companies, and so it's bad for those countries and it's bad for jobs here. But I want to go back a moment, though, to Black Lives Matter and point out, you know, that this is the alternative. The alternative to the electoral process and simply being a spectator sport where we don't get to participate, you know, and
we don't have a say in the policies that
we don't have a say
lives.
in terms of who rules us for 4 years or 2 years, and we don't have a say in the policies that get passed, you know, that are usually inimical to all of our interests. So the alternative is the organizations like Black Lives Matter. Think of what they've done in Chicago, Andy.
Yes.
I mean, they almost unseated a mayor. They got rid of a police
superintendent.
And the state's attorney was run out of office in a past election this spring. Now, this is not a huge group of people. This is a young, very motivated group of people who have made a real difference. And this is the example to the rest of us. If we were to multiply the numbers that would, of a group like this, and the difference it's made already with its small numbers, think of the difference it could make in the streets for places like Chicago and elsewhere, other urban areas, if it could be multiplied with support, money support, but also just people support.
And that's one of the tragedies of the elections, that it takes resources from that. But we're going to have to wrap up here pretty soon. I just wanted to call attention again to people to the sled walk. Oh, actually, this is another picture here, Sari. This was a very poignant picture. It says it all. White lives matter, Black lives matter. And so we're going to just shoot through these. Once again, what is rape culture? The march against it is going to be happening a couple Saturdays from today. Check that out, Saturday, August 20th. And then finally, we'd like to thank all of those who made tonight's show possible.